Hello, and welcome to today's episode where my guest is the state attorney for Palm Beach County down in southern Florida. It's David Aronberg, who I've met through Glenn Kirshner a couple of years ago. Finally got him on the show. Great conversation. I learned a lot. We covered a lot. That conversation begins at 22 minutes. If you want to skip headlines and clips to get right to the conversation. And thank you, as always, for joining me each and every day. I'm talking about the issues that are, well, at least I think, most important to you, your community, your country, your planet, and the most impactful issues that impact the most people. That's what we do here, and I cannot do it without you. So thank you very much for your support, your paid subscription. A couple new people signing up this week, which is absolutely amazing. Sign up before the end of the month, and I can't thank you enough. I'll be hosting a hangout tomorrow night. Looking forward to that. I've got a candidate joining me from Wisconsin. Also want to mention I've just agreed to a debate. I've never done an official debate, but I'm real excited that on October 8th at the Comedy Cellar in New York City, I will be debating Fox News' Jimmy Fallon. He's an old friend of mine from the comedy days. He now hosts a show on Fox News on Saturday nights and a radio show every day. Should be interesting. I'm really looking forward to that. And if you want to come, let me know if you're going to be in New York on October 8th. Thank you to those of you who are concerned that I'm working too much. I've got a few of those emails and comments over the past week or so, but I'm going hard till November 5th. Whether or not my vocal cord makes it, we'll see. But the pedal to the metal, everybody. And then I'll take some time off. Maybe I'll take a couple days off before if it's getting too much. But right now, I'm feeling pretty good. So let's get after it right now with your headlines from the last 24 hours. Top story to me, Missouri executed a man on death row yesterday despite objections from prosecutors who sought to have his conviction overturned and have supported his claims of innocence. That's right. Marcellus Khalifa Williams, 55, was killed by lethal injection, ending a legal battle that has sparked widespread outrage as the office that originally tried the case suggested that he was wrongfully convicted. An extraordinary move condemned by civil rights advocates and lawmakers across the U.S. Missouri's Republican Attorney General Andrew Bailey pushed forward with the execution against the wishes of the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office and the victim's family in the case. Absolutely horrific, modern day lynching, and just not shocking, but absolutely horrific. I mean, I guess it's always shocking, and I have such a hard time with the capital punishment. Mention it with David Aronberg coming up, but we'll talk more about it, I'm sure, at the hangout tomorrow night. But really terrible and sad news to start off here. But that is the news. As a reminder, it's the aberrations, it's the horrible things. It's not the great, beautiful things of a man coming home and hugging and kissing his partner and his kids and things going well. That's not news. That's the norm. Love happens every second of every day. Hate is a little bit more rare, and that's why we comment on it. At least that's the way I see it. Yesterday, the president, Joe Biden, used his fourth and final address at the United Nations General Assembly to argue that things can get better, even in a world that appears enveloped in crisis. He celebrated his efforts to defend Ukraine and rebuild America's global alliances. He also said that progress could easily collapse if the U.S. turns to isolationism. I'll bring some sound from that speech in the sound segment coming up. And of course, the other big story is from the Middle East, specifically in Lebanon, where tens of thousands of people, have you seen the videos and the pictures of people fleeing southern Lebanon yesterday as Israel continued to pound Hezbollah targets with an aerial offensive that has caused more than 550 casualties. Hezbollah fought back by launching a new barrage of cross-border fire, while Israel's military said it would accelerate its campaign against the Iran-backed militant group. Monday was the deadliest day in Lebanon in nearly 2 decades. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has told people of Lebanon to leave areas where Israel is targeting Hezbollah, thousands fleeing their homes, some after receiving automated calls, text messages, and broadcasts urging them to evacuate. An Israeli official told CNN the Security Cabinet had agreed to continue to raise the level of military operations every day. The Israeli military has not ruled out the possibility of a ground invasion. Meanwhile, the war in Gaza rages on. At least 30 people were killed there in Israeli shelling and airstrikes on Tuesday, with a second strike reported in an area of central Gaza and another in the northern part of Gaza. Absolutely crazy what continues to happen there. And next story, the U.S. District Judge, Tanya Chutkan, sided with Special Counsel Jack Smith yesterday when she said he can file a longer than usual brief in the forthcoming immunity litigation. But in addition to granting the government's arguably administrative request, the judge also rejected a handful of complaints that Donald Trump's lawyers raised in connection with the motion. I talked more and specifically with David Aronberg about that in our interview coming up. Also yesterday, Kamala Harris did an interview where she said she supports eliminating the Senate filibuster to pass abortion rights legislation, and disgraced West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin said he no longer can support Kamala Harris if she's going to eliminate the Senate filibuster. He's very, very upset, which means, well, par for the course for that asshole. All right, dock workers on the East and Gulf coasts are threatening to strike on October 1st, a move that could shake the economy, so hopefully they will settle a contract there. And speaking of the Gulf Coast, a hurricane watch and warnings of storm surges up to 15 feet high were issued Tuesday for almost all of Florida's western coastline as Tropical Storm Helene formed over the Caribbean Sea and is headed towards the Gulf Coast. And this one looks pretty bad. As far as I can tell in the news, every major news outlet is talking about this storm and projecting pretty bad. Headed right for western Florida, northwestern Florida, and the Panhandle, all the way up through Atlanta, is supposed to see heavy rains and winds. Meteorologists keeping a close eye on that, and I'm thinking of all of you down in the path of this storm. Helene is the 8th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season, so stay safe and get out of there if you can. And the good news for today is I saw one of my first beautiful autumn leaves today, and that's a sign. It's a good sign, and I'm happy to see it. The seasons of life change and evolve, and I love autumn. I love pumpkins. I love it all. And so that is today's good news story here at the end of the headlines. Let's get to your sound, shall we? Oh, and by the way, my apologies for yesterday. Apparently some of the sound clips were very low. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I will correct that on today's segment. Starting with President Biden's final speech, just a clip from it at the UN yesterday. I thought this was great, and so did apparently the people in the room in New York.
I made the preservation of democracy the central cause of my presidency. This summer, I faced a decision whether to seek a second term as president. It was a difficult decision. Being president has been the honor of my life. There's so much more I want to get done. As much as I love the job, I love my country more. I decided after 50 years of public service, it's time for a new generation of leadership to take my nation forward. My fellow leaders, let us never forget, some things are more important than staying in power. It's your people.
There you go, President Biden yesterday at the UN with a real big applause for his humbling statement and role modeling of leadership, which you don't hear in this clip or from this guy. This is the Speaker of the House, Christian nationalist Mike Johnson, being asked if there would be a normal handoff to power after the election. And he said, if it's a free and fair election. That's the caveat that we're going to continue to hear. It won't be. They're doing everything they can to suppress the vote, I think it's fair to say. But it won't be the kind of suppression that they're making up Republicans. It's the legal stuff happening in the courts where they're trying to make it harder just to vote, much less count the votes. Here it is. And the reporter's volume is a little bit low, but it's audible, and you can hear Mike Johnson's answer.
Speaker, do you commit to observing regular order in the certification process of the 2024 election, even if Kamala Harris beats Donald Trump?
Well, of course, if we have a free, fair, and safe election, we're going to follow the Constitution. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, yeah, we'll see about that. And Maria Bartiromo over at Fox Business hates reporting good economic news, so I just thought we would listen to her have to do that.
Welcome back. Take a look at the futures this morning. Another rally underway. The Dow Industrials up 67, the NASDAQ up 43, S&P 500 up 7.25, extending into further record territory. We're looking at last week's rate cut rally continuing. The Dow and the S&P 500 closing in record territory yesterday. So that's where we begin this morning in uncharted territory.
Uncharted territory. She hated doing that. Apparently, Lawrence Kudlow of Fox News has not been talking about these great economic indicators for a couple of days because he doesn't want to tell people how good things are going because he's just terrible. I love this clip. This is James Tallarico. He's a Texas state representative who's so far ignored my requests to come on the show, which is a little bit weird. I'm not sure why I haven't been able to get him on, but he's always great. And he is a Christian who I think defines Christianity in a much, much more moral and progressive way. We talked with Jim Wallace on the show yesterday. Clearly, James Tallarico has been influenced by the likes of Wallace and others because, well, listen to this. I just thought this was so good. I wanted to share it with you.
Christian nationalists have taken Trump as their new Christ because he's everything the first one was not. Jesus was poor. Trump is rich. Jesus was meek. Trump is a bully. Jesus lost. And Trump is obsessed with winning. I honestly think that if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance met Jesus today, they would ridicule him as a single, childless hippie. And in fact, Donald Trump Jr. explicitly rejected Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He said, turning the other cheek has, quote, gotten us nothing. How did we get to the point where loving your enemy is weak and loving your neighbor is woke? I mean, they are literally rejecting the central teachings of Jesus because those teachings don't serve their own self-interest. Christian nationalism is not about the way of Jesus. It's about the pursuit of power.
Yeah, real good stuff. How about it? James Tallarico. Got to get him on the show. Now let's head over to CNN, where last night it was Caitlin Collins joined Gretchen Carlson. Of course, Gretchen Carlson, the former Fox News anchor who sued Fox News for sexual harassment. And she was on to comment the latest from the disgraced former president, how did you hear this really creepy comment that he made in a speech tonight telling women that he will save them all and just that horrible, horrible Handmaid's Tale kind of rhetoric. Well, that's exactly what Gretchen Carlson referred to it as. I thought this was pretty good.
Your protector. Well, I think I'm going to offend Donald Trump in saying, as a woman, I don't need him to protect me. I'm fine on my own. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of other women feel that way. I did think, though, that this was very interesting because up until now, Donald Trump has fed up red meat to the base. Last night, I felt like that was a bit of an olive branch to independent women to say, suburban moms, independents, look at me, I'm here for you. He talked about the safety of women, the health of women. I mean, there's 2 women in Georgia who would argue against that based on what's happened to them with regard to abortion. And, you know, he's a little bit like the Handmaid's Tale to me, calling himself a protector of women. It makes you wonder what else is going to happen to women if Donald Trump is elected.
All right, there you go. I thought that was a pretty good clip that I wanted to share, as is this one from CNN. This is Nancy Pelosi on CNN with Jay Tapper suffering no fools with his question. I love it.
I'm sure that you hear from progressive voters, Democratic voters who say, as I hear from them on social media, the media made such a big deal out of Joe Biden's alleged cognitive problems. Why don't they talk about Donald Trump's cognitive problems? Well, Donald Trump talked about that just a second ago, and I want to get your reaction. Let's run that clip.
Oh, dear. Maybe we shouldn't run it. Oh, sorry.
They laugh at us all over the world. They're laughing at us. And you know what they're really laughing at? Kamala, because they can't believe that she's going to be president. They can't believe. You talk about cognitive problems? She's got bigger cognitive problems than he has, in my opinion.
Donald Trump saying that Kamala Harris has bigger cognitive problems than Joe Biden.
Why would you even cover that? This is a person who's not on the level. He is their nominee for president. He is incompetent. Let's not even talk about the silliness of it all and the weirdness of it all and the assault on women that it is. We're not going to talk issues. Incompetent. The only thing he did as president, The only thing he did as president when he had the majority was to pass a bill that gave 83 tax cut that gave 83 of the benefits to the top 1%, adding $2 trillion to the national debt. The worst job creation record of anybody president since Herbert Hoover.
Because of COVID, yes.
Well, it's not because of COVID. We put $3 trillion into the economy when he was president, working with and the Congress working together. We put $3 trillion into the economy. So don't blame it on. And what did he do with COVID? Denial and delay, responsible for thousands and thousands of people dying. So if you're going to forgive his job record because of COVID, make sure you attribute many of those deaths to him as well.
Not forgiving anything, just noting the content.
Incompetent. Forget silly and crazy and crooked and all the rest. Incompetent.
Oh, I love it. So good. Yeah, exactly. Well done, Nancy Pelosi. And now this clip went pretty viral yesterday because it's Mehdi Hasan taking on a New York Post reporter at a debate hosted by our friend John Donvan, who did not like this, I could tell. And I always love the classy John Donvan for scolding him for this. I thought it was a low blow that Mehdi Hasan took at the guy asking the question, but at the same time, I cheered myself if I'd be lying if I said I didn't. This was from a debate whose motion was titled, Were Israel's Actions in Gaza's War Justified? And a question from the audience to Mehdi Hasan from a New York Post reporter, and this is how that went.
I'd like you to be able to dispel that you're taking any money from Qatar by confirming that you're not taking money for Zateo for Qatar. Is Qatar funding Zateo? Yes or no?
It's a great question, John, because you work as a media correspondent for the New York Post. No, I'm not. I'm answering your question. Patience. We waited for you. You're a media columnist for the New York Post, were you not?
I'm a political reporter for the New York Post.
You were at one time a media columnist. You should read the Washington Post interview that I did literally when Zateo was founded. And Jeremy Barr, an excellent reporter, slightly better one than you, he asked me that question. And I said, no, we haven't taken any money from foreign governments or foreign citizens. Every investor in Zateo is an American citizen, has nothing to do with Qatar. So nice try. Better luck next time. By the way, since we're all in the spirit of asking questions, how do you feel about taking money from the racist Rupert Murdoch every day? All right.
John Donvan had enough of that. Love you, John. That's a great job. I can't wait to see the rest of that debate. Finally, I've got another rant from the great Trey Crowder, comedian Trey Crowder. He just does it as well as anybody else whenever he or JL, a few others come out with him. I love to share these with you. Here is Trey Crowder from his car.
Well, this week there was a slew of sex scandals on the American right, and I, for one, am the opposite of shocked. That's right. It's always the ones you most expect, isn't it? After all, protesting too much is all these sumbitches doth. Okay, it's September, pre-election. 'Tis the season for another self-inflicted Republican shame parade. Yeah. Teacher says that every time a public font of repressive rage gets caught doing some truck stop bathroom stuff, a demon gets its wiener ring. That's right. Okay, let's go down the list real quick. Matt Gaetz was accused of having brought a teenager to a sex party, which is the Republican congressman equivalent of a black dude bringing hot sauce to a white potluck. Like it's way too important for him to leave it up to chance. Okay. Also, a right-wing anti-LGBT school choice evangelist was outed as being a former gay porn star, which sounds like a Mad Lib, but is actually the reality we are all doomed to share. You only ever see headlines like this about experts on the right. You know, like you're probably not going to see a headline that's like Harvard immunologist and vaccine advocate found to have authored series of graphic dinosaur erotica. Probably. And even if you did, that's fine. Dinosaur sex ain't got nothing to do with vaccines anyway. But at this point, when a pro-gay hater is outed as being a secret gay, it's as American as apple pie. All right. And then finally, we got the big one. North Carolina GOP gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson, a man known for being publicly insane enough to make Marjorie Taylor Greene blush, right, was this week the subject of a bombshell report from CNN. Okay, now if you know Robinson, you know that in the past he has already publicly denied the Holocaust, called gay people filth, said that some Americans, quote, deserve to be killed, right, all of which, of course, went over like gangbusters with MAGA and made him one of their fastest rising stars. But now CNN's accused him of something truly unforgivable, commenting on porn sites. That's right. CNN unearthed countless porn site comments over the years in which Robinson, among many many other things, called himself a black Nazi, said that slavery was actually pretty cool, and said a whole bunch of stuff about peeing in his wife's sister's butt. Now, I think we can assume that if these comments had been limited to racist pro-slavery talk, he'd probably be fine. Might even get a bump in the polls, who knows. But it seems that MAGA is drawing the line at all that butthole talk because his numbers are plummeting and most of his staff has quit the campaign. And I guess it's reassuring that there even is a line to be drawn in MAGA, but we still all know at the end of the day, come election night, this out and proud, hate-fueled sex pest is still going to garner millions of votes from the party of Christian family values. And I, for one, think they ought to be ashamed of themselves. Okay. Oh, also, I almost forgot, this week it came out that RFK Jr. had a side piece. I assume he sealed the deal with her by giving her a necklace he made out of raccoon dick bones. But either way, the point is, when RFK Jr.'s sexcapades are the footnote on the week, you know the American right is truly on one. Love y'all.
Always so good. And just love it. Trey Crowder. Go listen to his podcast. Go see him live. Go tell him I said hello. All right. My guest joining me today for the first time on Stand Up, as was yesterday. See, I have a lot of regulars and a lot of new guests every week. Tomorrow, a regular, Wajad Ali, will join me. But today, it's David Aronberg, who's the state attorney for Palm Beach County, former member of the Florida Senate. He was elected there in 2002 as the youngest member. He served for 8 years. He is a Democrat. He does have to get elected to be the state attorney. But before the Senate, he worked as a lawyer in both the public and private sector. He was born in Miami. He went to Harvard Law and undergraduate. So pretty smart guy. Really happy to have him joining me on the show for the first time. I've met him a couple times at Glenn Kirshner's events, and I'm really happy that we finally connected and taped this interview. I think you're going to like it. Follow him on social media and support him as his burgeoning media career is taking off. He's doing very, very well with that, so I was happy to have him. And all more information for David, as all my guests, in today's show notes, wherever you're listening to the podcast. And, of course, if you are a subscriber, it comes in an email each and every day. All right, let's do it right now. For the first time on Stand Up, it's David Aronberg. There he is. We finally got him. Dave Aronberg, finally on Stand Up. It's great to get you here. I'm glad we worked it out. I'm really excited to talk to you. Hi, Dave.
Hello, Pete. It's great to be with you. This was 2 years in the making.
I know. I really slacked. I mean, we really connected 2 years ago at Glenn Kirshner's event. And then I saw you again this year, and I'm like, how come we haven't taped an interview? And we finally got it together with just a short period of time since we last saw each other. So here we are, and you are everywhere. I mean, you've had quite a career. Let's talk about your life. You went to all the best colleges, public schools, Harvard, and then became a state senator. What was your plan in college? Your career plan?
You know, I always loved politics. I loved the law, so thought I would do something in politics and the law. And I got elected to the state senate at a young age, and that was cool. But I really found my passion, I think, in this job as state attorney because it combines law and government work, you know, politics. I'm still allowed to talk about these issues after hours, before hours. It's unlike a judge where you can't talk politics at all. I'm still allowed. I get elected as a Democrat, and as long as I keep politics out of the office, which we do, you can do things after hours, like do the Pete Dominick show, and you can talk about stuff that judges can't. So I love this job. And as much as I love it, I'm leaving in 3 months after 12 years because nothing good lasts forever. And I want to start a new chapter of my life. And part of it is to do more of these types of shows.
Oh, really? So you want to move more into media and out of your current role as the state attorney?
Well, that's part of it. I'm going to go into private practice, do some legal practice, but also I'm going to see where the TV and the streaming things go. I've been doing a lot more of that in the last few years. And, I enjoy it. I love being able to take what people consider as complex legal issues and break it down into common sense terms for people who don't have a law degree. I think the law is not transparent enough. In fact, the criminal justice system has all this built-in secrecy. Grand juries are secret. There are no cameras in federal courtrooms. There are no cameras in New York courtrooms. And then you have legal terms, all these Latin phrases that are just confusing. And so I try to show that it's really not that complex or difficult to get when you break through the garbage, the stuff that we put up to try to keep non-lawyers out of the conversation. I want to bring everyone in the conversation.
So your role, tell us a little bit about what your role has been there as the state attorney. It's an elected, like you have to campaign. You're in an elected office, right?
Yes, it's every 4 years, and you campaign and you run with a party affiliation. But when you're elected, you can't let politics seep in. Like one of my first cases, high-profile cases, I should say, one of my first high-profile cases was involving Trump's then campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski. It was when Trump was running for president the first time in 2015, when a Breitbart reporter broke through the Secret Service's little bubble they had around Trump and brushed up against him. And then Lewandowski pulled her away, and she said that she was thrown to the ground. And the police did charge, based on probable cause, that a battery had occurred. That was an unwanted touching. That's all it takes. But prosecutors have a higher burden. We've got to prove cases beyond a reasonable doubt. And there was no way that we would be able to convince a jury unanimously that Lewandowski was guilty of a crime here, because the video showed that he was just pulling her away and didn't do so with any enormous force.
I wish you could prove in a court of law that somebody was an asshole. That would be a whole different.
That's not a crime.
Right.
In this case, that's the thing. When it comes to these types of cases, or any case, you can't let politics make your decision for you. It's got to be based on the evidence and the law. And if you don't think you can do a conviction in a case, then you can't do it. And in this case, the Lewandowski case, I left it up to my chief assistant, who's the head of misdemeanors, and African-American gay woman. And she saw this in the middle of all this political firestorm and said, no, we can't prove this. No. And that was it.
So you're right in the middle of this attempted assassination. I mean, I saw you standing there at the press conference answering questions. This guy who almost took a shot at Trump. What is the latest on this guy? I heard they just found out he had like child porn. They've arrested his son. He had a real bad background. I mean, criminal background in the past. And my big question is how he got a gun. But what was your role in that case? It was weird to see you on TV there that day.
Yeah, this job can turn on a dime. I was at the golf course on Sundays practicing, and then the siren went off for thunder and lightning. And so I went in to take a break, and then all of a sudden someone sent me a story about how there was a shooting outside of Trump's golf course. At first, you remember, people thought that it was just a casual shooting of two gang members unrelated to Trump. And then I called the sheriff and learned, nope, there was a lot more to it, and it likely involved Trump. And so that's when I got involved, and I went to I went to meet with the sheriff and the federal representatives, and we determined that I was going to go ahead and try to keep this individual they had in custody, Ryan Ruth, under state charges. I was helping to prepare warrants with my team and to do a motion for pretrial detention. We didn't want him to get out of jail pending what the feds wanted to do. So I took part in this press conference. I said, we're going to be doing these warrants and this motion. And the fact that we're doing this does not preclude the feds from also coming in and charging. And then as soon as I left the press conference, the feds turned to me, the representatives, and said, we're going to take it. Yeah. And so I said, okay. As a matter of course, then we will stand down and defer to the feds. We don't try to compete with them. We don't have turf wars. We just try to assist them when we can and do justice.
Well, it would seem that the governor there has a turf war, because Ron DeSantis came out and said they're going to conduct their own state investigation because they thought the DOJ was biased against Trump because they'd already prosecuted him for other crimes, right?
It is not unusual for state prosecutors to do a parallel investigation where we support the federal prosecutors. It is unusual for state prosecutors to do a competing investigation based on the presumption that the feds are compromised and corrupt. So that's where you have the turf wars based on politics. Now, fortunately, the investigation at the state level is being run by the statewide prosecutor, a guy I know I used to work with named Nick Cox. He's not political. He's not going to let politics get in the way. And here's the other part of this. When the state demands, and this is what the state attorney general did, they're demanding that the feds turn over information so the state investigates because the feds can't be trusted. Well, what do you think the feds will do when the state is demanding stuff because they accuse the feds of being compromised? You think they're going to be in a rush to stop their investigation, or at least to send stuff in the middle of a pending investigation to the state investigators who distrust them? Not a chance. So you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And so I think what's going to happen is the feds are going to do their investigation. And when they're done, they will send the stuff over to the state because they are professionals. And when Trump and DeSantis complained that these charges against the suspect are just small ball, just wait and see, because I expect some more serious charges to come any day now.
The only question I have about this guy is how he got a gun. He had a criminal past, including owning a machine gun. You got some pretty lax laws. Just about anybody can get almost any gun they want down there in Florida. I don't know where he got this gun. The serial number was scratched off. I think that anybody who tries to kill the president is almost always crazy. That's shorthand for some kind of mental illness. But the bottom line to me is, regardless of someone's politics or their incentive to commit violence, the fact that people can get guns so easily, high-powered rifles in this case, is the real common thread. And I feel like I don't know how he got his gun, and I feel like that's the only thing that matters. What am I missing?
You're not missing anything. I think we should have that conversation. Every time there's a mass shooting, when we want to have that conversation, we say, no, too soon, can't have that conversation, and then people forget. Well, we should have the conversation how a guy with a significant rap sheet, with previous violent offenses, who is not allowed to own or possess a gun, was able to get a weapon of war like this. So that's a very important conversation to have. And now he'll be arrested for it, and charged and prosecuted for it. Good. But how did he get to begin with? How easy was it? We don't know all the details yet. But I agree with you. It's far too easy for someone like this to get a hold of a gun. We don't have an assault weapons ban anymore. And you can get it without background check at gun shows and other private transactions. So there are plenty of loopholes in the law that need to be addressed if we're ever allowed to talk about it.
I wanted to ask you about another Florida case just while I have you. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I thought maybe you might be, with what happened with the football player, the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill, when he got pulled over there the other day. Do you know anything about that case? Because, I saw the video like anybody else, and I was outraged by the way that the police officers treated him, or the way they treat people so often. And I thought that guy should be fired right away. And I just wonder how often you deal with police officers and if that was in your mind an aberration, or if that's commonplace that police officers behave that way with the guy they've pulled over who's clearly not a threat.
Yeah, I'm a big Dolphins fan. Tough season so far.
Sorry.
And Tyreek Hill is the best player on the team, and he's driving this fancy car, and he's speeding, and he's pulled over. And I must say this, Hill could have handled it better himself. And he has admitted that. He could have been more compliant. He had some attitude, and he pulled his window up. Now, the reason why he rolled his window up was because onlookers, fans, were gawking, and he didn't want that to happen. But for a police officer, you have the right, police officer, to make the person pull down the window. It's a safety issue, especially when the windows are tinted. So the police officer had the right to demand that the window be pulled down. And then when Tyreek was not compliant, he has the right, the police officer, to pull him out of the car. But he didn't really give Hill enough time to get out of the car.
Right.
Hill was trying, at least in my eyes, to get out of the car when the police officer dragged him out. That was unnecessary. Also, the attitude the police officer showed, I thought, was also unnecessary. Just like Tyreek Hill could have handled it better, the police officer could have de-escalated the situation. Instead, he escalated it.
Yeah.
And this was a mess that didn't have to happen, especially when you push him to the ground. Why? This was a traffic stop for speeding. So, yeah, I think it was handled badly. I think there will be a sanction. He was not going to be fired. I'd be shocked if the officer would be fired from it, but I do think he'll be sanctioned in some way. And hopefully we can learn from this. And good thing we have body cameras to see this now, because in the past, we never did.
Yeah, they really are a game changer in a lot of ways, I feel like. Do you have anything else you would say about how they've changed policing at all? I mean, it seems like a pretty – I remember a police officer said to me in Trust, it was off the record. I was just in a hallway at Sirius XM where I used to work, and he's like, ever since these body cameras came out, we got to wear these. We can't do, what we always used to be able to do, which is be able to rough up, brutalize a suspect. And I feel like they've changed the game a lot. What do you think?
They have changed the game. And there needs to be more legislation that requires all agencies to use it. I think they should be mandatory. It's still an ad hoc system where different agencies use it, not everyone, and they have different rules for the body cameras where some are turned on at all times, some are not. And so that's why sometimes you see in some squirrely situations, you see there was no body camera footage and you have to wonder, was that intentional? And so, look, I've been a supporter of law enforcement as state attorney, a good relationship with law enforcement, but also I've prosecuted law enforcement when they step over the line. In fact, my office was the first in 30 years in Florida to convict a cop for an on-duty killing in the case of Corey Jones, which made it into a Super Bowl ad a few years ago. So I hear you. I do think body cameras are definitely a positive, but they need to be used.
Corey Jones was shot to death by police officer Newman Raha while waiting for a tow truck by his disabled car in Palm Beach, Florida. I'm just reading about that case now. Wow.
Yeah, check that out. Al Sharpton spoke at Corey Jones's funeral. This was a big-time case where you rarely will see a successful conviction in this type of case because there's only two people there and one of them is dead. And the cop said it was self-defense because Corey Jones did have a gun, and the cop said he pointed it at the cop, even though Corey Jones had no real priors other than a marijuana possession. And Corey Jones was, by all accounts, a really good kid. His car got broken down the side of the road. He didn't want to leave his drum kit. He was coming back from a music gig because he had to play at church the next morning. So he stayed with his car. And then this undercover cop who thought Corey Jones was a criminal came up and hassled him and escalated and Corey Jones ended up dead. And you may be wondering how we knew that the cop lied about it all. Well, we later found out after we started investigating that Corey Jones was on the phone with roadside assistance, which recorded the entire incident. It was like manna from heaven when we found that recording.
Wow. Good work. Great work. Hey, have you, I probably should ask you ahead of time about all these things, but you know, if you don't know about it, but I'm wondering if you've paid any attention to the case of Marcellus Williams, who, as we're speaking, is supposed to be put to death in Missouri for, allegedly murdering a woman, and he's tried everything to appeal his case. The Innocence Project took his case on, and they're saying that he's an innocent man and that there's DNA evidence that would exonerate him. I'm against the death penalty no matter what. I think it's medieval and primitive. I think we're the only civilized country that does it. I think there's a lot of even conservatives and religious folks who are against it. I don't know what your personal stance is on it or if you've paid attention in this case, but it's heartbreaking that this guy that anybody, I think, gets put to death, and several hundred people have been exonerated after their deaths. Can you imagine anything worse than an innocent person being executed by the state? This case seems pretty controversial. What are your thoughts on this case, if any, and what are your thoughts in general on capital punishment?
Well, I have to admit, although I saw the latest that he is about to be put to death in Missouri, I'm not familiar with the facts of this case. I was not following it, so I can't speak to the facts of this case. Overall, I do support the death penalty, although I think it should be unanimous. In Florida, we reduced the number to 8 to 4. I would have that was after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas massacre, which was as bad as it gets, where the guy whose name I won't mention massacred 17 people, most of them young, innocent children, and he was given life after the jury was not unanimous. It was 9 to 3. So I do support it, but I recognize that, DNA evidence is important. If DNA evidence, which I think can pretty much assure that this is the right person, if that shows that in this case that this is not the guy who did it, then there needs to be some involvement by the courts. I don't know what the latest is in this case in Missouri, but I actually am confident because of DNA that these days it is very, very, very unlikely that there is a mistake made when it comes to the ultimate punishment because of the existence of DNA evidence and all the hearings and all the habeas corpus reviews and all of the evidentiary advantages that defendants have. And this is speaking from prosecutors. We have to prove everything beyond a reasonable doubt with a unanimous jury. So I do think that it can be applied in a way that is constitutional.
All right, we're going to debate the death penalty another time in the future because I want to get to a bunch of other issues that I want to ask you about. Specifically, the big news today, which, of course, you've been following, is Here's the headlines. CNN, special counsel can present substantial new evidence against Trump in January 6th case. Of course, we're talking about special counsel Jack Smith in Judge Chutkan's case. Washington Post, judge allows lengthy brief in Trump case, rejecting claim of election impact. The New Republic headline is Jack Smith scores another win in Trump's January 6th case. And so this is a big development. Obviously, I guess Trump's lawyers are arguing it's too close to the election for there to be, it looks political. I think that's ridiculous simply on this case because it's been kicked down the road so many times, including obviously by the Supreme Court. Explain to us what happened today, its significance, and why it matters. Obviously, the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity is why she had to take a relook at this and see if he was immune to these charges. I guess that's my understanding. That's all I know. Dave, help me out.
Well, Trump's strategy has always been delay, delay, delay. But in this case, it's if you at first do not succeed, try again. Trump's lawyers have asked the court repeatedly to dismiss the case. They did this 2 weeks ago. Judge Chutkan said no. They said then today, and they were just yesterday, they said, Judge, we'd like you to dismiss the case. She's like, no means no. Come on. The defense team is basing it on the Supreme Court's immunity decision, saying that Jack Smith can't move forward with this case at all. Jack Smith, in response, is going to now provide the court with 180 pages that sets forth his case, why it can go forward despite the immunity decision. And it will include exhibits, stuff we haven't seen before, although it's questionable whether it will be released to the public. That's up to Judge Chutkan. Evidence against Donald Trump and his involvement with trying to overturn the election to show that this was not an official act. So be careful what you wish for, because you may receive it where you get a mini trial. And I know that that's not going to happen before the election, but at the very least, a briefing that contains embarrassing evidence that could come out before the election. The fact that Judge Chutkan allows the 180 pages is significant because normally you're only allowed 45 pages. So she's going over that times 3+. So this is significant. Trump's team is freaking out about it, and understandably so.
Well, there's not going to be a trial, but I feel like the thing that matters the most is what the public learns, what voters learn. Hard to believe that it would change much, although maybe there's some blockbuster piece of evidence or recording that we've never heard that could affect people's opinions. Stranger things have happened closer to elections, obviously. James Comey and the FBI announcing an investigation into Hillary Clinton just days before the election. A lot of people think that had an effect on it. Is there anything that you would speculate that we might hear, see, or learn that would be new, that the public would learn?
I don't know, but the fact that we're talking about it is bad for Trump. The fact that January 6th is back in the news is bad for Trump. He wants you to forget about January 6th. It was just a tourist event, right? These were patriots. He doesn't want you to know that he said he's going to pardon most or all of them. And so, yes, this is bad for Trump whenever it dominates the news. Now, Trump was hoping it would go away, it'd be dismissed like Judge Cannon dismissed the Mar-a-Lago documents case. In my mind, that's the strongest case against the former president. But that has been dismissed by Judge Cannon, who was appointed by Donald Trump, as we know. And now that's on appeal. Trump doesn't want to talk about these cases except to try to raise money from his base. But for swing voters, these matters are toxic. And this is living proof. So when Trump says these cases only help him, it only helps him with his base. It is not good for him amongst the few swing voters that remain out there. And we know that because of his desperate attempts to delay this matter past the election and to try to get the whole thing dismissed. He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want you to think about it.
Like Jack Smith, I don't know anything about the guy, but he clearly doesn't want to give up on this. He clearly, it would seem that the way that these cases have been handled, especially, as you mentioned, Judge Cannon, the way she handled it, the way the Supreme Court weighed in on these things, even after there was a unanimous decision from a lower court, it seems like he is pretty determined to follow through. Is there anything that you would say, your opinion about the way he's handled it, the way it could be going with the special counsel?
Jack Smith is a prosecutor's prosecutor. He's not going to just let this go. He doesn't deal with politics. He just follows the evidence and the law. And he believes, as do many of us, that Donald Trump broke the law and should face accountability for it. And then he's too much of a of a career prosecutor to bash the Supreme Court for putting its thumb on the scale, or to bash Judge Cannon for dismissing a case despite years of precedent the other way. So he's going to do what he's supposed to do. He does his talking in the legal briefs, not at a podium, except the one time when he announced a filing of charges. But Jack Smith keeps his head down, keeps his mouth shut largely, and he just does his talking in his legal briefs, which is the way to do it. That's why I have great respect for him. His briefs are excellent. He's making compelling arguments, and he's not going to let it go. And he doesn't care that there's an election that's coming up. He wants the public to know as much as they can, because they have a right to know this stuff. So I do think that if Trump loses the election, and it's looking like he will lose the election, that you will see the D.C. election interference case go first. That'll go first to trial. Then I think you'll see the case in my neck of the woods, the Mar-a-Lago documents case. I think that'll be back on the docket once the 11th Circuit overturns Judge Cannon's ruling. And as far as the Atlanta case, Fulton County case, who knows? Right. Then, of course, there's a sentencing in New York that'll happen pretty quickly after the election as well.
I hope you're right about the election. What are your thoughts about Florida and the politics there? I was just down in Orlando at a convention for Teachers Union, the Florida Education Association. I interviewed the Democratic Senate candidate, Debbie Mukersal Powell. Do you know her? And it seems like she's got a shot. It seems like I've heard people say Florida is in play. That's hard to believe. You follow politics. You can comment on politics. What about your state?
Well, the chairwoman of the Democratic Party, Nikki Fried, insists that she is polling that shows Florida is very much in play, because every time I do a podcast or a show and I say, I don't know, she texts me and said, I need to educate you. And Nikki's a friend and she's doing a great job. I'll say this. I really do believe that Debbie Mukersal Powell has a shot against Rick Scott. I've seen polling that shows her down by like 2 points, 1 point. Rick Scott has never won an election by more than a point. And he's a lot of money. And when I make these prognostications, when I make my picks here, it's because I follow the money. Yeah. You can tell a lot where the money is spent. And I see a lot of Rick Scott ads negative against Debbie Mukersal Powell. Well, why are you spending a lot of money going negative against your opponent? Because you see your opponent as a threat. So I do think she's got a real shot. Now, Florida's a tough state. It's very expensive. It's got 10 media markets. We now have 1 million more Republicans than Democrats as registered voters. So it's an uphill climb, but not impossible for her. She's a good candidate. She's been in Congress before, and I think she's got a shot. Now, about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I haven't seen any Kamala Harris ads here in Florida, and so that makes me believe that it's going to be harder for her to win, because if I think the Harris campaign thought they would win Florida, they would spend some real money here. But, maybe there's some surprise. I'll tell you one wild card. It's Haitian voters. Haitian voters, which there are many in Florida, although people think they're lockstep with the Democratic Party, that hasn't always been the case. Rick Scott has cultivated support in the Haitian community because he has shown up. He has been supportive as far as going to events and, meeting with the right people and gaining some headway in that community. Well, no longer. I can't imagine that Haitian voters are going to see what's going on with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and say, to hell with these guys.
I don't know anything about Haitian voters in Florida. I did work with a Haitian guy in Florida when I worked at Disney World in my college internship in 1994. And I love the guy. And I every Haitian people that I've met are wonderful. Generalizing about an ethnicity is always a ridiculous thing to do, but I'll go ahead and do it, which is to say, if you're a Haitian voter, I don't know where you were voting, but you may not have been paying attention. A lot of people just aren't engaged, aren't paying attention. But I'm thinking they are now, based on the fact that we have been hearing about Haitian migrants who are here legally being demonized in Ohio for weeks now by J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and all of their supporters. I just have to think that they're pissed. They've woken up and they're gonna make their voices heard. But I have no data on that. I'm just guessing.
Well,
so you
the fact that Trump and Vance are doubling down on this stuff and their supporters are doubling down, I think this is going to motivate them to go out and vote if they weren't already motivated, and they'll be voting for the Democratic ticket up and down. So that could help in Florida. Whether it's enough to push Kamala Harris over the finish line, I don't know. It's tough in Florida. But I think if I had to pick which one, Harris or Powell, would have the better chance in Florida, I think it'd be Powell.
What about the referendums there? You got cannabis and abortion on the ballot. What does that mean? And I'm not sure what
that helps Democrats too. Yeah, you got people who like pot, and that generally favors Democrats to come out and vote. And you have abortion on the ballot after Ron DeSantis put through his 6-week abortion ban. You've seen a real outpouring of support for this amendment. I think it will get 60%, but the other side is trying to spend money to make people believe that this licenses abortion at any time, including after birth. I mean, that nonsense. And so, we're dealing with misinformation, but I think the abortion ban will pass, and that will be a huge black eye for Ron DeSantis because the abortion ban, the 6-week abortion ban, is his. He owns that. And if it's repudiated by more than 60% of the vote, he owns that too. Because to pass a constitutional amendment in Florida, you need at least 60% of the vote. That's the only thing that makes me believe it's not a done deal because of that high burden. But I think both of those amendments pass.
Oh, interesting. What are the laws currently? There's no recreational on cannabis. No recreational, obviously. Medicinal, I think. Do they have that?
Right. It's medicinal. And so you see it. I wonder how much of a change it will make, but it would expand it to recreational. We'll see. There's an ad running right now with a sheriff from North Florida who's campaigning in favor of it. So I think you'll get support in a bipartisan way. This seems to be a popular issue across party lines, although the governor has not been supportive of it, has been against it, and is spending taxpayer money against both amendments, 3 and 4.
Hear that Florida doesn't have legalized cannabis. You guys have such a bizarre state with bizarre laws and kind of crazy culture where anything goes and everybody's flying their freak flag down there, but no cannabis. I mean, it seems like you wouldn't have been surprised if Florida was the first state to legalize cannabis years ago. Of course, it was Colorado, but I just think it's weird that they have. I mean, you guys have ER waiting room billboards in Florida. Everything is weird about Florida, I feel like, but not cannabis. It's bizarre to me.
We were the state that had the pill mills where the whole country would get their opioid fill. Right. They'd come down to Florida. But, when it comes to cannabis, that's a bridge too far.
Let's just talk about the Supreme Court. That's something obviously you cover and think a lot about. What do you think of this current makeup of the court and the idea of any type of reform, much less ethics rules that they would have to follow, just like every other judge, every other court in America and in the world? What do you think about this current court and the way that it operates?
I think that when it comes to the Supreme Court, they need to have an ethics law that's binding. It's so interesting that when you're a Supreme Court justice, you don't have to abide by the ethics rules that the lower court justices do because you make your own rules and you determine whether you violate them. Wow, it must be nice. Huh? I would love that. Can you imagine if since I'm state attorney? Well, I'm state attorney. I'll determine whether I abide by the speed limit. Well, that would be really nice, but that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all, and it shouldn't work for the justices. And there's a crisis of confidence with the Supreme Court, and because of that, you see that. You have people going in all different directions where Alito's flying flags upside down. Clarence Thomas is taking massive gifts from right-wing donors, and the public thinks they're all political. So this is a problem, and Chief Justice Roberts needs to confront it. Instead, he blames the media and everyone else but himself. And it turns out that Chief Justice Roberts is the reason why the Supreme Court has lurched to the far right after he got driven over by the conservative justices in the abortion decision, Dobbs, when he was on the wrong side of the 5-4 ruling to overturn Roe versus Wade, meaning he sided with the liberals. He thought apparently it was a bad look for him to be on the losing side of these things. He's the Chief Justice after all. So now he leads the court's conservative 6-3 majority to do things that are so radical, like the immunity decision, like the Fisher decision, where you water down the ability to convict people for obstruction of an official proceeding. There are things. How about the decision in the Colorado case about whether Trump should be on the ballot? They expedite those measures that Trump wants expedited, and they delay the measures that Trump wants delayed. And it's a bad look for the Supreme Court. And Chief Justice Roberts, it turns out through a New York Times article, is the guy behind it. He's not being dragged along by the conservatives. He's at the forefront because he wants to show that he's in charge. I'll leave you with this one bit of silver lining. I've done videos on this. If I plug at the I have the channel on YouTube, True Crime MTN. I work with the Midas Touch Network.
Yeah.
So I have it's called True Crime MTN. I call myself the Florida lawman.
I'll link to that in the show notes. What do you call yourself?
The Florida lawman. You like that? I got it trademarked. Well, okay. I'm going to leave you because I like to leave people with something positive.
Yeah. As
bad as we see in this court lurch to the right, and Chief Justice Roberts has been the problem, there is a justice on the Supreme Court who has been a surprise of late, who has decided to abandon the MAGA movement. Do you know who I'm referring to, Pete?
Justice on the Supreme Court abandoning the MAGA movement?
Yeah, one of the conservative justices seems to have bailed from the others.
Gorsuch?
And seems to say no more.
Gorsuch? Amy Coney Barrett?
There you go. Amy Coney Barrett.
I didn't realize. Yeah. Why do you think that? Go ahead.
Think about all her rulings. She ruled with the liberals of the court against the most radical part of the immunity ruling, although she did rule with them on the rest of the immunity ruling. She castigated Chief Justice Thomas multiple times in various cases, including the Rahimi case. That was the one where the domestic violence perpetrator would be allowed to own a gun again. And Thomas was like, yes. And Coney Barrett schooled him at the oral argument about it. She has given speeches saying she gave a speech at Catholic University saying that this whole concept of looking at history and tradition to determine your judicial philosophy is wrong, because it's like looking to a pre-decided group of people. It's like only asking your friends if you look nice, right? You're not going to get a fair answer. You're going to get a biased answer. And there have been other cases where she continues to dissent from the majority. In the recent case in Arizona, there was a case about whether or not in the election that people who don't show proof of citizenship could be registered to vote. She sided with the liberals, and she has broken away from the conservative majority on a number of measures ever since the Dobbs decision. Yes, she went ahead with the Dobbs decision. She overturned Roe versus Wade. She needs to be held accountable for that, as far as I think that was the wrong thing to do. But since then, she has made it a practice to dissent from the conservatives and side with the liberals on a number of important cases.
Wow, I didn't quite realize that you'd had that record, but that is good news. Huh. Well, listen, Dave, this is great, man. We've been able to weigh in on a whole bunch of things that teach me a whole bunch, especially this breaking news with Judge Chutkan and Jack Smith and that case. I hope that we can do this again. I hope everybody hearing you for the first time is going to be following you everywhere, including on that YouTube channel where you do all kinds of stuff. And I'm very excited about your media career, which has already taken off. So thank you very much for joining us. And let's do it again real soon.
Hey, Pete, thanks for having me. And I just want your listeners to know that whenever we go to Glenn Kirshner's event, and that's where I met you 2 years in a row, you always bring the house down. You're the guy no one wants to speak after, and that's why I don't. That's
very generous. And I want you to know a secret, which is at the last one, I glanced at this woman like 3 times, and she was just stunning woman. I was like, boy, that woman is beautiful. And then she came over and she was like leaning on you. I said to Dean Obeidallah, who is that woman? He goes, Dave Aronberg's wife. I was like, oh my God, now I feel terrible that I was like eyeing her. But your wife is beautiful. I don't know. It's not quite the same compliment, but I felt bad that I was checking out your wife. But congratulations. How long have you been married?
Since May. And yes. So, yeah. And she shares our same political views. Great. And it's great. And she will now be your biggest fan now that she's going to hear.
I'm sure she's got,
how you said she's so attractive. That's
50
very nice.
qualities more important than her beauty. I just thought it was hilarious that I was like, who is that woman over there? And then Dave is like, oh my God, well, congratulations. That's wonderful. A newlywed. I look forward to having you back and grabbing a drink with you next time I'm in Florida or you're in New York. We got to get together. And I really, really appreciate you joining us. And I learned a lot from you, Dave. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, there he goes, David Aronberg, and I admit I'm a creep. Sorry, David. She was nice. She started yelling over "thank you" from behind the computer where he was sitting doing the interview. So all is well. And I hope you liked it. Hope you liked that conversation with David Aronberg. Let him know. All of his links are in the show notes and the email that you get from me each day. If you're a subscriber, if you're not, please sign up now. There's still a few days left in the month. Sign up. It's just $5 to support this daily podcast and the rest of my work and activism and everything that I'm doing. I really appreciate your support, the support of democracy, the work we do on anti-racism and anti-sexism and everything else that we believe here at Stand Up that I am constantly kept in line by you for. I hope to see you tomorrow night. Hang out anytime on the Discord platform. If you haven't signed up to join there or to chat there, then do it now. Write a rating and review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and follow on all the rest of the social media platforms. They're all linked at the end of every day's show notes, as well as a link to John Carroll. JohnCarroll.org. Buy his music. Support him. He writes and performs everything that I use here on the show, and we just absolutely adore him. So go support John and go support yourself. I don't know what that means, but just take care of yourself today. Be compassionate to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Stop beating yourself up. Love you. Talk to you tomorrow.
Off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.